Hey everybody, welcome to a new video. Today we're going to talk about how to take sharper photos in sports photography. Okay, so this video is aimed at those who are starting in sports photography and you want to take sharper photos. So if you're a bit more experienced, then the things I'll be talking about hopefully should be trivial to you. Okay, so the first thing we want to talk about is shutter speed. In sports photography, we want to freeze the action, and to achieve that we use a really high shutter speed. So I say a good starting point would be 1,000 of a second. Now that's very generic, and that's why I say it's a good starting point. It obviously means that you might need to adjust depending on the ambient light that you have, what type of sport that you're photographing, but roughly you should aim at 1,000 of a second at least. If you're shooting, say, baseball for example, or hurling here in Ireland, that might not be sufficient because the movement is extremely fast. So if you want to be able to freeze the action, you might need to go higher than 1,000 of a second. If it's a really sunny day and you have your ISO at 100 and you want to be able to use your aperture really wide open, and you still want to be able to freeze the action but have a proper exposure, then you might need to really raise that shutter speed to be able to have a proper exposure and still freeze the action. And in that case, you're actually working to have a proper exposure, not necessarily freeze the action, because say if you're at 1/4,000, then obviously you're going to be freezing it, but you know what I mean. So you need to adjust depending on your situation, but a good starting point would always be 1,000 of a second. Now if you're shooting, say, children who are normally a bit slower, you can start slowing that shutter speed a little bit, but that would be the first thing that I would check is what shutter speed are you using? Is it fast enough to freeze the action of the sport that you're photographing? If it's not, then raise it. Another thing you want to be sure that you have set is AI servo for the focus mode. This ensures that you are constantly focusing the subject that you're tracking. So you don't want to just focus once and that's it. Now if you're tracking somebody and probably taking a lot of shots, then use AI servo, because that will ensure that the camera will try to keep up with the focus as you're tracking the subject. Speaking of focus, you will most likely have the chance of deciding which point of focus you want to use. So it could be a single point, it could be an area, it could be a bigger area, or it could be fully automatic. You do not want to leave the camera make that decision. You don't want the camera to make the decision of what it thinks it should focus, which would be automatic. What I recommend is that you use one single point, use the middle one and point to the chest of the player, because that's the area that's easiest to focus on. And then if you aim to the chest, most likely the head will be in focus. So aim for the chest, use one single point focus, and you should be fine. Now if you have a more advanced camera where it has face recognition and eye recognition, and you feel comfortable that your camera can keep up with that, then by all means use that, because ultimately what we want is the eye to be in focus mainly, and then the face and whatnot. But for most cases, if you point at the chest, the face should be in focus as well. So remember that, very important. Do not let the camera decide which part of the frame should be in focus and which one shouldn't. You should be making that decision. One last thing when it comes to focus, there is a technique called back button focus. Now this will not make you take sharper images, but it is a technique that you can use to have additional control of the focus of your pictures. So it does not make your images sharper at all, but it gives you a bit more control, so to speak. I made a video. If you want to check it out, just click the link. Another factor that can influence the sharpness of your photos is the aperture of the lens used. Obviously, if we spend a lot of money in fast glass, and by fast glass I mean they have a really wide opening, so they let in a lot of light, so the f2.8s and whatnot, we want to use that, right? If we spend a lot of money, we want to be able to use those wide apertures. The problem is when you're using a wide aperture, the plane of focus, so the area that is in focus, is very shallow, right? And that also is affected by the distance that you have to your subject and whatnot. But just to keep it plain and simple, if you use a wide aperture, so a small number, the zone of the picture that is in focus is smaller. So one advantage of those kit lenses and the slower lenses is that because they are so slow, the area of focus is much bigger. So if you're using a fast lens, so a 2.8 or so, keep in mind that because of the area of focus being small, if you make a tiny mistake, it could be that, say for instance, if you're shooting baseball and you focus here on the arm, the face might be slightly out of focus. So you need to watch out for where you point your focus, and the aperture can play a big part in that as well. So keep that in mind. One more thing that can affect the sharpness of your photos is understanding the game. And you might be thinking, what are you talking about? Well, let me explain. If you understand the game, if you know what's going to happen, if you can anticipate the action, you're going to be prepared for the crucial moments. So you're not going to be picking up the camera when it's just too late. You're going to be start shooting, you're going to be start tracking the athletes before the peak action, right? So you know something's going to happen, you are already prepared, you are already tracking the subject, you are already taking pictures. Because if you start it too late, maybe your camera will start hunting for focus. Maybe it'll be just that 1 second or millisecond that it's just too late to grab focus, and by the time you start shooting, it's too late. So yes, knowing the sport I do think helps a lot to get sharper pictures, because you can anticipate what's going to happen and you're going to be ready before the moment arrives. Also, some of us do not have 20/20 vision, so we might need glasses, or our eyes just cannot see as sharp, I guess, in real life. So there's that little wheel next to your viewfinder that's called the diopter. If you're seeing everything out of focus there, maybe you should check it out. Make sure that you focus on something that you know should be in focus, and then start spinning that wheel until you see it in focus as well, because this will not make your images sharper. It will just focus and make sure that what you're seeing, what the camera is seeing, is what you see on the viewfinder as well. So if you use glasses, or if your vision is not very good, maybe you need to adjust the diopter just a little bit. And that's very easy to click by accident. So sometimes just putting down the camera or picking it up, I will touch it, and then when I put my eye to the viewfinder, I'm like, okay, there's something's off here, and I adjust it, and there you go. So it will not make your picture sharper, it will just help you see what the camera is seeing clearly. And a few final things: if you're using a really long lens, a heavy lens, make sure you have a tripod for stability. If you're using really fast shutter speeds, make sure to turn off the image stabilization, because it's not doing anything. In fact, it might actually hurt the images. So, and it spends more battery too, so you don't need it. So tripod. And if you really need to slow down the shutter speed because it's, I don't know, really dark or whatever, make sure that your hands and your elbows are up against your chest, so that you can have a good you can grab the camera really well and not shake. Instead of, I see some people picking up the cameras like this, just weird positions where it's clear that they're not going to be very stable. And that's it for today, guys. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel if you're not already, and until next time, take it easy. Bye bye.